Gawi bianga garabara, Gawi wianga bemuma, Gawi mujin malin benanga, acknowledging Father Sky, Mother Earth, and those who've walked before us. Warami, Wellamabami, Iora, Giarira Duraman Jalarinya, Gilligan Daranga Daba Wayanga, Din Gorangarang, Burraburungal, Bijigal, Gadoomba Dame. Hello, and a warm welcome to the Barramadigal clanlands of the Darug Nation, where the salt water meets the fresh water. We gather on country today, the land of my ancestors. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and future, and special guests here today. My name is Peter Strawn, Artistic Director of Janawi Dance Clan. Janawi is all about the continuation, revitalisation of Darug language, story, song, and dance. I'm a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 3, and a proud Darug woman, wishing you all a safe passage and stay on Darug country. Barramata, the resting place of the eel. Barradui. Nanga mai nini, nanga mai bujari. Calling in the good spirit, calling in the good dreaming. Nubaringora, nubaringora. Love country. Yano miriga gatijurigo.
Hi guys, I'm Nat. I'm one of the head curators for TEDx Youth at Sydney, and it is so good to have you guys here. I'm so excited. We have an amazing lineup of speakers and performers, and I think you guys are going to really love it. So our theme today is future creators. Young people, which is you guys, have the biggest, boldest, brilliant ideas that are reshaping, rewiring, and reimagining the world. Today is about you, reflecting your peers back at you. All of our speakers today are 27 years and younger and truly embody the theme, future creators. And importantly, they've been put together by a team of young curators who have chosen them. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Ria, one of our amazing youth curators, who's going to introduce us to our first speaker.
Hi everyone, so I'm Ria and I'm going to be introducing you to the next couple of speakers. So, I'm sure we've all wanted to sue someone, right? Whether it's been an annoying neighbour or even Macca's for never having their ice cream machine working. So annoying. Well, how many of us can actually say that we've sued someone? Not many of us, but our next speaker can. Anjali Sharma, at age 16, sued the literal government. She took a letter class action against the government, arguing that it did in fact owe a duty of care to young people when it came to the effects of climate change. Anjali saw the boxes she and fellow young people had been placed into and slowly dismantled it to create steps for her to stand up for what she believed in. So, without further ado, could we please bring to the stage Anjali Sharma.
At the age of 16, I sued the government. I was the lead litigant in the Sharma and Minister for the Environment class action, which took the then Environment Minister, Susan Lee, to court, arguing that she owed and was breaching a duty of care to young people to protect us from the impacts of climate change. On first instance, we won and changed climate law. But then Susan Lee appealed, and before a higher court, our case was overturned. Now, I promise I'm not saying this for clout, but to make sure that everyone here knows that I know what I'm talking about. After all, these are big kid conversations in which young people, like us, are constantly told that we have no place. On one hand, we're urged to be the change we want to see in the world, but when it comes to advocacy, we're put in a box. There are firm limits on what we can and can't say. We can't be too radical. We must focus on individual responsibility, and no matter what we say, it cannot challenge those in power. Let them talk about emissions reductions and fossil fuels while we talk about shorter showers and plastic straws. Let them make the big decisions for the world while we keep our heads down. We're put in a box. We can talk about climate change, sure, but we mustn't point the finger at those in power. At the age of 12, I was in this box. July through to September 2017 saw widespread flooding in my home country of India, where much of my family still lives. Experts called it the worst in decades, with more than 45 million people affected. On one hand, I was seeing those I loved be devastated by the reality of climate change, and on the other, my school implored me to focus on recycling and taking shorter showers. I was outraged, and I wanted to make a difference. And I thought I was, by following their lead and speaking up and criticising surface level issues like plastic straws. I thought my education was empowering me, but it was cementing me inside this box. Now, at the age of 14, I was seeing more and more climate disaster around me. 2019 saw the heaviest monsoon in 25 years make landfall on the shores of India, bringing with it once again widespread flooding and devastation. But it was at our shores too, in the form of the horrific 2019 bushfire season that didn't leave a single soul in this country untouched. But it was something within me that had changed at this point. I'd been watching YouTube videos, documentaries, I'd been surrounding myself with like-minded people, and I'd begun to hear about climate wreckers such as Woodside, Rio Tinto, Santos, the fossil fuel donors that every day overtly influence our politicians to do their bidding, day in, day out. And again, I was outraged, and I was struggling to reconcile facts like this with the reality of the climate crisis that I saw unfolding before my eyes. So I joined School Strike for Climate. And in 2019, I led 200,000 people through the streets of Melbourne as we called on our government to increase their climate ambition. But I was realising that somewhere along the way, what had started off as supportive nods at the age of 12 had turned into disapproving remarks as we grew in number and noise, and people asked us, "Who do you think you are to be telling the government what to do? What do you even know?" They wanted us firmly back in that box. But I was armed now, with knowledge, with passion, with ambition, and I wanted firmly out. I wanted to make more noise. At the age of 12, I'd been pointing the finger at myself and at everyone around me. At the age of 14, I'd finally placed responsibility on the government. And at the age of 16, I was ready to do this in a public forum where I was sure they couldn't ignore me any longer. So when I was asked to be part of a class action that had the potential to make new law, I had no second thoughts about saying yes. Suddenly I was thrust into the public spotlight, but this is where criticism was at its loudest and its worst. Because my advocacy was no longer palatable. I wasn't in that box. I was a 16-year-old woman of colour who, instead of just talking about climate change, was taking the government to court. Racism, sexism, threats, hate, these were part and parcel now of daily life. So I told myself that what I was doing was finally a threat to those in power, and of course there were people who wouldn't like it. Of course they would make it known, and I soldiered on. But I can't lie, it was devastating to realise that in a group of 8 plaintiffs who had sued the government together, there was only one towards whom hate and vitriol to this extent was being directed. It was the one person of colour, of course. It was me. People were outraged as is because of what we were doing, but they were more outraged because of who I was. It was my identity itself that was the challenge. That was the box. I've realized now that breaking out of this box as a young woman of color brings with it criticism, sure, but it also brings impact. Because for the first time, people were watching as I talked about the hypocrisy of a government that even now pretends to care about the climate crisis while funneling through fossil fuel approvals regardless. People were listening as I talked about the disproportionate impacts of the climate crisis on frontline communities like my own in India, those who were and are being hit first and worst with the least resources to rebuild. And even though the federal court overturned our case on appeal, the climate science that we put to the court on both instances was accepted. It'll now form the basis for more cases like mine. I went from a 12-year-old who thought that if we all just turned off the tap while brushing our teeth, then we could all save the environment together. I stand before you now, a 19-year-old who knows that if we are to have any sort of concrete impact, then our attention must be focused on those in power and that we cannot keep living in this box. The world is going to tell us that we're young, that we're idealistic, that we're naive. The world is going to tell us that we don't have all of the answers, or any of them, really. The world is going to tell us what to say, when to say it, exactly how loud, and the world is going to tell us to pipe down. The world is going to tell us to get back in this box. We don't have to accept that. We must not accept that. We cannot keep living in this box. We cannot keep justifying, taking directions on how to advocate from those we should be advocating against. Because young people don't have all the answers. We don't. We don't know everything. But the one thing we do have is skin in the game. We have stakes in this conversation. This is our future. We have a reason to continue to insert ourselves into difficult conversations where we're told we don't know what we're talking about, because this is our future. We have a reason to continue to stare up to those in power, look them in the eyes and tell them, you don't get to decide what my future looks like. I do.
So now, most of us can't remember a world without the internet, right? Whether it's been updating MSN statuses or making sure our BeReals are on time, we all have access to the internet 24/7. But how has the internet really changed over our lives? And what can we learn from it? Our next speaker is going to take a deep dive into this question to understand how we can use the old internet to influence our life now. Let Michael's son take us on a nostalgia-filled journey of the old internet and how we can bring it back.
Let me tell you a story. This story begins in the summer of 2008. It's one of those scorching summers where everything stops and time itself seems suspended. I'm 11 and sitting in front of the computer for days on end, melting into my chair. Somehow my dad has found this website that he claims is this cool new virtual reality experience, and I'm 11, which means I still trust my dad. So I hop on this site, right? It's called Exit Reality, which is exactly what I want to do because it's 42 degrees outside and there's no aircon in our apartment. If you know what Second Life is, it's kind of like that. You can make your own avatars in the most rudimentary 3D graphics I have ever seen in my life. And then supposedly you can meet with and talk to other avatars in this endless expanse of digital landscape engulfed in a permanent sunset. But because it is 2008, everything freaks out when you press any button. And the lag is enough to give anyone anxiety. I mean, I already had anxiety as an 11-year-old, so it made me want to literally die. But I persevere, even though there's nary a soul in sight. I key smash my way through pixelated deserts and abandoned streets. And then, in the corner of my screen, something appears. Someone appears. Their avatar is wearing a leather jacket and a mohawk. So I approach them and I'm like, hey, nice mohawk. Once again, I'm 11, so please withhold your judgment. I'm begging you. We start chatting and he tells me his name is Tommy. And then he asks ASL, which of course means age, sex, location. And obviously I'm like 17, male, Canada, even though I'm an 11-year-old boy living in Northwest Sydney. We add each other on MSN and we start talking for hours a day. I'm talking hours since both of us are horny teens, or tweens in my case, with absolutely nothing better to do. He tells me his favorite band is Death Cab for Cutie, and I'm like, oh my God, same, even though the only thing on my iPod is Coldplay. And then suddenly we fall out of contact. I'm not sure how it happened, but it was devastating, pulverizing. One day we were talking for hours and the next we just weren't. My first real heartbreak, though certainly not my last online boyfriend. Now, you might be wondering why I'm telling you this story, and it's not just because I love embarrassing myself on stage. Tommy, if you're listening, please DM me, I'm desperate. No, I'm just kidding. I'm telling you this story because I know you have a similar one, especially if you also grew up in the days of the early internet, right? Maybe you also got your heart broken by some guy you'd never met, or maybe you were less dramatic than I was and just made a friend on Club Penguin, or God forbid, Habbo Hotel. What I'm saying is this: we should return to the days of the early internet, the wild west of the internet, where everything felt a little looser, a little jankier, a little more spontaneous, where you too could meet the love of your life and get ghosted as an 11-year-old, where discovery still felt possible. Here's the thing. The internet as it is right now is more restricted than ever, right? More corporate, more buttoned up, more difficult to find things outside of what we actually want to see and what's fed to us algorithmically. I'm an internet culture writer and my screen time is 12 hours a day, which means I'm clinically insane. But even if you use the internet like a normal amount, I'm sure you'll have noticed that the internet today is a very different place to what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. The internet as it is right now is both faster and harder than it ever has been. If you're on TikTok, which I think most of you are, you'll know that micro trends pop up at the speed of light, then disappear into the ether, never to be spoken of again. As an experiment, I wrote down a list of things that were going viral on TikTok about a month ago while I was writing this talk, right? Here's that list now. The Hunger Games, okay. Vodka pasta sauce, flavored water, water talk, and unicorn syrup, being a la 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 girl versus being an okay girl. I mean, none of these words are in the Bible, right? If you cast your mind back even further, the trends become even more meaningless. I'm talking coastal grandma aesthetic. I'm talking frazzled English woman. I'm talking the return of twee, pasta chips, whimsy goth, dark academia, Barbie core. What do these words even mean? We are cycling through content at such a velocity that things become old news the second they hit the feed. Even me standing here right now telling you that things are happening faster, you guessed it, that's old news too. To quote one famous meme, everything happens so much. All of this means that it's harder to see the things that we actually want to see. We're losing control. This is not new, right? You know, we always talk about things like the Instagram algorithm and the Netflix algorithm and how they shape our broader interests, our tastes, our politics. We've known for at least half a decade that the YouTube algorithm is radicalizing people, pushing them towards more and more extreme content. You start watching an explainer on Glee, and 17 hours later, someone's explaining to you why COVID is a hoax. So what I'm saying is that we're all doomed, we're living in the end times, we're all gonna die. But what if there was a solution? What if we could turn back time? What if we could bring back some of the features that made the early internet so utopian, so lawless, so full of spontaneous connection and random experimental zeal? Well, we can. So the first solution is the Galaxy Brain solution, of course. It's to repurpose our existing platforms into spaces that feel like the early internet again. Like for the past couple of years, I've been turning to niche Facebook groups as replacements for the early internet forums of the 2000s. I know I'm gonna sound like the world's oldest Zoomer right now, but back in my day, we had these forums with message boards where you could message people about your specific interests, things like Fall Out Boy and other emo bands, countercultures and various subcultures, PlayStation games, etc., etc., etc. For the past decade or so, a smorgasbord of Facebook groups have popped up kind of in their place. They act very similarly to these forums. There are groups for public transport stands. There are groups for architecture heads who just really love stairs. There are groups for sharing disgusting photos of terrible food. I mean, there is a group for everyone, okay? There is a group called Subtle Asian Traits that many of you might have heard of. And it's literally just a group about being Asian. And it has 2 million members, making it one of the biggest Facebook groups, right? Now is the peak time of absolute chaos. We are living in a time when everyone, even your aunt's friend who keeps sending you minion memes, has left Facebook, which means the only people left in these groups are truly the most desperate, the most committed, the most insane, the people who have thrown all caution to the wind and said, who cares, to any given conventions of social media. These spaces are completely shielded from the frenetic, demanding nature of online life today. You can choose whether to post or not, whether to engage or not, whether to take things further or not. You most likely won't know anyone else in these groups. There are hardly any celebrities either in these groups. No one's in it to be seen. Being in these groups is truly like experiencing the last almost utopia online. Now, there is also an easier solution. but you need to bear with me, okay? Because I know it sounds super dumb. The solution is to talk to your friends. And I promise I don't mean this in a kind of get off your phones, we live in a society kind of way, okay, I promise. I mean talking to your friends and asking them what they're listening to, what they're consuming, what they've come across on their feeds. The worst thing about the algorithm is that it's so tailored to us that it can feel inescapable. But the best thing about the algorithm is that it's so tailored to us that no two feeds are the same. Your friend is listening to a song that you would have never encountered. Your parents are on a side of YouTube that you didn't even know existed. Your aunt's friend is still sending you minion memes, okay? I want every person in this room to try one thing after this. Open up your phones, you have permission, open any app, and show the person next to you the first thing on your feed. You might be surprised at how strangely vulnerable the experience is, and also how surprising the results are. I mean, this is how I found out that my partner's TikTok feed was 90% musical theatre content, which made me question all of my life choices. But ignoring that, looking at your phone and looking at someone else's feed can help us bring back the randomness of the early internet. Think back to me and Tommy, for example. What we shared was a random, fleeting encounter which couldn't have happened anywhere else but online or at any other time but the early internet. That phase might be long gone, but we can still bring back the emotional high of spontaneity, of discovery. So go forth and be crazy again. Go and have your heart broken by some guy who lives 3 continents away from you. Go and discover a corner of the internet previously hidden from you. go and be a tween online again and go and turn the clock back to 2008.
So that was our amazing film by Daniel Marula Filmmaker. How do you feel represented in the media? For a lot of young people, it's a bit impossible to say that we feel represented all the time. Well, our next speaker, Tanita Ragazi, is an example of someone who champions grassroots representations through radio shows and other media. Driven by her passion for community and grassroots storytelling, Tanita is an example of a young person who champions this through her work. Now, can we please welcome Tanita to the stage?
Sound is a powerful tool. It can be used to evoke so many unexpected emotions, bringing along with it memories and thoughts to the surface in ways we least expect it to. This is an incredible part of radio, but even more importantly, community radio. Listen to this, for instance. Where does it take you?
So right now I'm walking a track that snakes through some pretty dense shrub in a suburb called Kincumber on the New South Wales Central Coast. And like a lot of the Central Coast, Kincumber is built around some pretty beautiful waterways.
The audio captures your attention, but what takes you deeper is the voice. It hooks you. With community radio, it's led by people from the community, volunteers, not for profit, but for connection. You have this beautiful relationship with the voice on the other side. As you grow to learn it, you learn about its little quirks and idiosyncrasies, like when they have a quiver in their voice, or a bit of vocal fry, or when there's that one word that always has them stumbling through a sentence. It's not an us and them situation. There aren't those barriers. They're talking to just you. And you feel it. When you listen in regularly, you understand and feel close to the voice. It feels intimate. With community radio, the person that you listen to is someone you trust in. They're from your community. They're your circle. So I'm here to tell you that you're more or less in a relationship with the voice you hear on the radio. But good news is, it's not that complicated and it's actually pretty sweet. I mean, when you think about it, who else would you listen to other than that voice that keeps you company on your commute to work? Or the person that wakes you up on a lazy Sunday morning as you're making breakfast? Now, this is the voice that I listened to and built a relationship with for 20 years.
سلام عرض می کنم. صمیمانه سال نو و نوروز را به همه شما عزیزان تبریک عرض می کنم.
This voice belongs to my father. He's had a show that airs regularly on Tuesday nights. So growing up as a kid, we used to skip dinner and listen to the radio instead. It was our unorthodox after-school ritual. And then eventually, when he would sign off, we knew he would be home in 30 minutes and would have dinner all together. When he and my mother sought asylum here in their late 20s, they were learning how to create and connect to a community all over again, where they didn't speak the language or necessarily share their culture. It was in these years where they found something indispensable to them and their community radio. For over 20 years, he meticulously researched issues that affected their community, but were often misrepresented in mainstream media. He shone a different lens on these issues by giving a platform to underheard voices and told the story from the bottom up. Now, that's a really powerful thing that's built into community radio. You have this unique opportunity to tell a story that's community-led and driven by giving a platform to those who are often underestimated, an afterthought. It's an even more powerful thing when you consider the numbers too. Greater Western Sydney is the fastest growing population in Australia. Its large and diverse population is about 2.2 million people. That's more than a quarter of New South Wales's population. Pretty big, right? So when you think about it, who understands your community and its issues better? How do you think a big mainstream outlet, driven by KPIs, advertisement, and revenue, would report on a local issue compared to your community radio station? Now, this is where community radio can do one better, by playing a critical role in serving its community. Right now, I work in community radio, and it started off as something where it was to just gain a bit of industry experience, but now I give up my weekends doing it. I love it. And it starts off with the little things, like hearing a story that sticks with you and it's bothering you like an itch, so you decide, hey, I'm going to pitch it to my producer. From there, you're spending all your spare time in between classes and work, trying to find those closest to the story through weird and organic channels. From there are little hiccups, but it's your team that picks you up when things fall through. The show, the team, they do it all for you, the listener, and the talent too, because it's someone who never gets their story told, at least not properly. It's the underage student who sees the first-hand impacts of climate change in their community, so they decide, what the heck, I'm going to organise a school strike for climate. It's the old gentleman who spent the better part of his life in community housing and has now taken up campaigning in his late 70s to help him and his neighbours keep their homes. It's all these people from different walks of life championing their own community and their own stories on a platform where they feel heard because of you. These are the people that come in to share their stories. So, with that in mind, I want to take you through what it's like sitting behind that mic with the panels. So, it's early on a Saturday, and you've probably had a big night, so I want to ease you into it. I'm going to play a little sting. So, this is a jingle of sorts. It's going to fade out, so you'll hear my warm dulcet tones welcome you.
Backchat.
Backchat.
Politics and current affairs. Backchat.
Backchat.
Your alternative to talkback.
It's Saturday, April 22nd, and you're listening to Backchat, where we bring you the stories of Sydney and beyond. So I'm going to introduce you to the show, what's coming up, and then we dive straight into the segments. So I'm going to level with you. At this point, behind the scenes, it's a little bit chaotic. We're loading stings so they're ready for the rest of the show, making sure the songs are ready for the breaks. All the while, I'm keeping an eye on my producer who's sitting behind soundproof glass, making sure that it sounds good on his end and we're running on time. All the while, I have a guest with me in the booth, mic'd up, and I want to make sure he's having a good time, because most likely, it's his first time on the radio. So you don't know this tuning in, but sometimes we get the jitters, kind of like a first date. We're sitting there thinking, what are they thinking? Does it sound good to them? At this point, your attention might be fading a little, so I'm going to capture you back in. I'm going to play something called a question. It's a raised stab.
You're listening to Backchat on FBI Radio 94.5. Right now, we're chatting with the CEO of Youth Action, Kate Munro, about what Zoomers and millennials are thinking about this upcoming state election.
So you've been quiet up until this point, but I want to hear from you. I want to know, do these issues affect you? Do you have any thoughts on it? And so does our guest. So I'm going to ask you a question. Sometimes I ask you politely, like what your thoughts are, but most often I will use a cheeky trick in the book. I'm going to bait you. I'm going to use a controversial question, a hook.
And you can let us know what issues you're voting on, or if you even care at all. Text in 0409.
So I've kept you on the edge of your seat for most of the show. Occasionally, though, the mystere between you and I is broken because there's a moment where I slip up, you know I've slipped up, and there's something called dead air. Dead air is kind of like we're on a date and you've asked me a question, and mid-sentence I've just totally blanked, and we're left with nothing but this weird, awkward silence. And you're thinking, oh my God, is she having an aneurysm over there? Is she going to pick it back up? And I do. I pick it back up, I carry on, and you decide I'm going to laugh it off and continue listening because, hey, she's only human. There is real power to this kind of radio. I saw it with my dad, with the issues he covered, like rallies in Sydney for wrongfully imprisoned political figures in Iran, to even happier pieces of community celebration. Now I see it with myself, with the stories I cover in Western Sydney and beyond, like housing, climate injustice, affordability for young people, all from a grassroots perspective. What has driven us and so many others who work in community radio is the passion for the story. It's the connection to the community. I've seen real change happen from community radio by telling that story from the bottom up. How a story is shared is critical in its approach, delivery, and as a result, its impact. I love making radio. Even more, I love making community radio, but it has everything to do with you, the listener. There are community radio stations all over Australia, led by passionate folks who have that same care, love, and connection to their community. In today's age, where we consume media on so many different platforms, existing and emerging, sometimes to see ourselves best championed, all we need to do is to tune into our local community radio station.
Hi, I'm Matusha, one of the youth curators for TEDxSydney. Have you ever been curious about what Web3 or crypto or NFT means? If you are, you're in for luck. Our next speaker is a true expert in the blockchain technology field. Ashi is a serial entrepreneur and a Web3 advocate whose work has been recognized by the world's largest brands like Sephora, Forbes, and Time. So let us warmly welcome Ashi to the stage.
Ownership is core to being human. In ancient times, our ancestors roamed the lands and they fiercely wanted to own food and their territories for survival. As agriculture and trade emerged, ownership evolved. From surviving to thriving, ownership's been an important part of our society. Today, we own things like clothes and property, and we're constantly looking for the next thing to own. Why is ownership important to us? It's because it gives us security. Ownership drove our ancestors to develop technologies to better secure their futures. Today, ownership has transcended beyond the physical to include digital. You have every right to control something that you own, like your identity. But on the internet today, is your identity really yours? The data that we give away for free online has become the world's most valuable currency, and it's used to power the most profitable corporations, like big tech. So I was recently shopping for a new vacuum cleaner online, and I came across this weirdly specific ad for these lime green vacuum shoes that cleaned the floor as you walked them. And I made the mistake of clicking on the ad. I was just curious. But now my recommended products have gone from weird to wild. And the algorithm thinks I'm into some seriously bizarre things. But all that aside, why should you care about your data? This is a question that I asked myself for a really long time. And here's the thing. Your data is not just a collection of zeros and ones. It's a powerful reflection of who you are, what you believe in, and what you stand for. As we become more digital as a species, our data becomes a key to our personal identity. And when that information falls into the wrong hands, it can be used to strip you of your most basic human rights, being silenced, discriminated against, losing your right to vote. When we lose ownership of our data, we lose our ability to make autonomous decisions. Platforms like Facebook and TikTok, they seem to know us more intimately than we know ourselves. They know our likes, our dislikes, our deepest fears and who we want to be. And this is used to dictate every part of our online experience. In 2016, a company called Cambridge Analytica harvested personal data from 87 million Facebook users without their consent. Armed with this data, they manipulated the US presidential election. But for the first time in history, with Web3, we as individuals, as consumers and citizens, can take back our power from corporations, and we can use it to shape the world that we want to live in. So, what is Web3? Web3 is an evolution of today's internet, and here's what came before it. So Web 1 was the internet as it was first invented. Think static web pages and no interactivity. It democratized information, but only a handful of users had the technical skills to publish content. With Web 2, platforms like Facebook democratized content creation, making it easy for you and me to share our ideas with the world. But when we use these platforms, we are the product. We pay for them using our personal data, which they own. Now, Web 3 lets us safely exchange value online without a middleman. It's secure, it's tamper-proof as no one owns or controls all the data. Instead, data is stored on the blockchain, accessible to all of us. For the first time ever, Web 3 lets us own digital items or assets. They're stored in something called a digital wallet, which is like a safe and a passport for your identity on the blockchain. So what this does is gives you control over your data, who you share it with, and how you get paid for it. Web 3 can also let creators own and sell their work directly without middlemen like streaming services or galleries. So whether you're an artist, a musician, or an entrepreneur, you can use NFTs to turn fans who believe in your vision into co-owners who earn royalties when you succeed. It's a win-win situation. Who here drinks Starbucks? Raise your hand. Even though they never seem to get my name right at the counter. I'm a loyal customer. I think it's the thrill of trying out their new drinks that keeps me coming back. In today's world, my rewards always seem to expire before I get a chance to use them. But what if there was a way to sell the rewards you didn't use and even play a role in shaping the brands that you love? Well, Starbucks now lets customers resell their rewards and co-create future experiences through NFTs. Today, Starbucks is a $130 billion company. Just imagine for a moment, what if, through NFTs, you'd had a chance to own a stake in the company as an early supporter, help create new drinks, and earn royalties every time one of those drinks sold? Where would you be now? Iconic brands like Nike and L'Oreal are also using NFTs to give their customers digital ownership and let them play a role in their future. Imagine designing virtual Nike sneakers worn by the next Michael Jordan and earning royalties every time a pair sold. Where could that take you? As consumers, we now have a choice. When we own our data, we can make autonomous decisions about it. And Web3 gives us that power. The power to own a piece of our favourite brands, the power to shape what they stand for, the power to be co-creators rather than just passive consumers. But that's not all. Web3 can allow us as citizens to unite as a global community, to make our voices heard, not just in words, but in action on important issues like climate change. Climate change is the most pressing emergency of our time. Rising temperatures and seas could displace 1.2 billion people by 2050, leading to widespread famine and war. But did you know that only 3 countries are responsible for half the world's carbon emissions? How can we ensure that they're doing their part for the environment? How can we hold them accountable? That's where Web3 comes in. What if they were to report their carbon emissions and credits on the blockchain? It would be trustless, it would be transparent and publicly verifiable. Today, I ask you to take the first step, to do your research and be open to the possibilities of Web3. It's not all scams and silly coins, but with Web3, we're empowered as individuals, as consumers and citizens to rally behind the causes that we truly care about. I believe that good technology makes us more human. It increases our ability to achieve our true potential and evolve. We're on the cusp of one of the greatest technological revolutions of our time. And if we want to build an inclusive future, we need everyone to participate. Ownership of our digital identity isn't only core to being human, it's a human right. So let's own our identities and the future.
I think the first time I was made aware about the concept of speed was when I was watching Disney Cars. And the opening scene was where Lightning McQueen was talking to himself, saying, "I'm speed, I'm faster than fast, quicker than quick, I'm lightning." And I was like, whoa, speed, this is cool. On that very day in the evening, I was riding my bicycle and guess what? I was fast, but I wasn't safe. That was probably the first time when I was also made aware about the concept of speed kills. Humans are obsessed with speed because it's in our DNA. It's not because we are impatient. It's not just a millennial or a Gen Z thing. It's about achieving efficiency and productivity. When we travel at high speeds, our bodies and brains react similarly to falling in love. Adrenaline is released, making us excited and energized while heightening our awareness. Dopamine is also released, creating a sense of achievement and euphoria. In fact, traveling at high speeds also releases serotonin and endorphins, making us feel good. So it's not just about breaking the rules, but about the thrill and pleasure that speed brings to us as humans. Traveling or flying at high speeds has been a common theme in various mythologies, symbolizing agility, courage, and devotion to a cause. We have got Hermes in Greek mythology, Hanuman in Hindu mythology, and feathered serpent in Aztec mythology. Pegasus in Greek and Garuda in Hindu mythology were transportation for gods and heroes, but they also symbolize the importance of technology that allows for a faster travel. Now, you all must have heard about subsonic aircraft. You know, the commercial airliners that we travel in. We are almost at the verge of getting supersonic aircrafts. They travel up to 3 times the speed of sound. But I'm here to tell you that future is hypersonic. Hypersonic vehicles can fly at 5 times the speed of sound or more than that. Imagine a world where transportation is no longer limited by speed barriers. A world where you can travel from Sydney to New York in just 3 hours. A world where possibilities of exploration and connectivity are limitless. As an engineer and a future creator, I believe that we are on the cusp of a transportation revolution. Hypersonic vehicles will enable rapid response in any emergency or disastrous event, delivering aid and relief to affected areas quickly and efficiently. It has potential for space exploration and colonization, and what makes it great is that it offers reusable options to launch payloads into space. Hypersonic vehicles could open a new way of collecting data. It can provide faster and accurate data collection from remote areas, which could ultimately lead us to better understanding and management of environmental challenges. And let's not forget about military advancements. I mean, the improved striking capabilities, faster response time, and increased deterrence are just game changers. So, we can say that speed at which we can travel is correlated to technological progression in society. Therefore, hypersonic is the future, or future is hypersonic. That's all for today. Hopefully you'll get to see me talk more about this in a month. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
So, how many of you own a property? Raise your hand. Not that many. Well, sometimes breaking into the Australian house market may feel impossible. Our next speaker would like to address this issue as well as many other issues that young people face. Sam Austin grew up in Western Sydney and he is the New South Wales Young Planner of the Year. He is a fierce advocate of addressing the Australian housing crisis and making our cities more resilient and livable. So let us warmly welcome Sam to the stage.
To everyone in this room under the age of 30, you're being locked out of living in the city you grew up in. We're in a housing crisis, and we, the city's youth, are the victims. Now, it's not like we don't have a solution to this problem. We spend thousands of hours researching and analysing how to make Sydney a great and affordable place to live. But our governments are trapped, making terrible, old-fashioned decisions by people who just don't really care about you and I. So let me tell you how we got in this scenario. You may think that government officials research and analyse the best spots for new buildings, and it's true, they do. But each month, they're required to put these forward at various town hall-style meetings. Now, if you've ever had the pleasure to attend one of these meetings, like I'm often required to, you won't find a nice sample of the community all having their say. No, you'll find a room filled with rich, old, retired residents. And they will all be saying the same thing. No, you can't do this. No, you cannot do that. New housing? No. I've already got a house. Why do we need any more? These people, they're called NIMBYs, which stands for not in my backyard. Now, their thoughts and opinions aren't any more or less valuable than your own, and they do deserve to be heard. But consider it from the perspective of your own grandparents. They're not thinking 10 to 20 years ahead about dealing with the challenges you and I are going to have to face, like addressing climate change or making sure there's somewhere affordable to live. No, they're thinking about the next 6 months of their retirement and whether their investment property goes up in value. Put simply, they just don't care about the challenges we're facing. And unfortunately, they get their way every single time. So what does it mean when we keep saying no? It means our cities are coming to a standstill. There are no new homes being built anywhere close to the city centre. Instead, the existing homes just get more and more expensive, and you and I need to move further and further away to find something affordable. This vicious cycle of saying no forces young people to the very fringes of our cities. Instead of being able to live near our friends, our families, and our jobs, we are trapped into tiny, tiny boxes of houses in hot, inefficient suburbs 2 hours away from anything. And the impact this has on our cities is devastating. Our communities are being pulled apart. Our nightlife is dying. Instead of protecting our bushland and our koalas, we're bulldozing it for tarmac and concrete. Because we are so scattered, we are shackled to driving our gas-guzzling cars every single day. Saying no is more than just politics. It is senseless and entirely avoidable environmental, social, and economic destruction of our cities. All right, so now I've shown you what happens when we keep saying no. What happens when we start saying yes? What happens when we start listening to the youth of today? We start creating places for people. We create neighbourhoods with a mix of shops, parks, and offices so you and I can live, work, and play in the same area. We create townhouses and apartments of all shapes and sizes so everyone can find something they love and somewhere to call home. Instead of being trapped in our Thank you. Even better, we can build this near public transport, meaning you and I can get across the city without needing to drive. Think about it. How great would it be if you just lived down the road from your friends and family? Wouldn't it be great if you could just walk or cycle to work in 15 minutes and save the planet while doing it? We can take all the space we've saved from building outwards and make large swathes of inner-city parklands for you and I to socialise in. We can, rather than being in our private little boxes, we can create public spaces for public art and make a city of culture. At night, you can walk down the road to your favourite bar or restaurant, or just hop on a train to the next suburb over for a great night out. This sounds pretty good, doesn't it? This is not some far-flung future. This is something we can have right here, right now in Sydney. But to make it happen, we can't just keep hearing from those who say no. We have to hear from the youth of today who care about their future. The youth who say, yes, I want a cleaner, more sustainable city. So why don't we hear from the youth? Put simply, the system sucks. The system doesn't care if it hears from you or if it hears from the angry resident. Diversity is optional. There is no requirement that young people need to be heard. However, it really doesn't have to be this way. Across the globe, governments have been empowering their youth for decades. The City of Paris has something called a youth panel, and this panel gets to directly advise on how the city spends money on social housing or limits the use of short-term rental accommodation. However, until the system changes, you need to get up and you need to get vocal. Don't show your local officials that you care and that you want a solution to the problems we're facing today. Don't be a NIMBY. Be a YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard. As an urban planner who's been a part of that decision-making process, trust me, you have a voice and we never hear it. Did you know, each week, your local council and the state government post a laundry list of the various projects and proposals underway? If there's one thing I can embed in you to take away from today, it's that you need to be checking in and writing in on each one of those applications. Tell them that, yes, I want this park in my neighbourhood. Yes, I want these apartments nearby so I can afford to live within 15 minutes of my friends and family. Yes, I want more to see and do at night that isn't just McDonald's. Yes, build it in my backyard. So get out there and make sure you're building a future that you'd like to live in, because we're going to have to inherit it, whether we like it or not.
Hi. So I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker. As I've gotten older, I've started to think about what does cool mean? And I've come to realize that it's somebody who is unapologetically themselves and lives by their values. And I can't think of somebody who embodies that better than our next speaker, Noel. Noel Sari is a content creator. She has about 380,000 followers across platforms. She's worked with brands like Gucci and Fendi. She literally walked in Australian Fashion Week last week. And she's deeply kind, deeply intelligent, and so cool. Can you guys please give an incredibly warm welcome to Noel Sari?
I love putting together a fit. The pieces, the accessories, how they align with my values. When I first started my blog, it was a way to express myself. But soon a Pandora's box of questions opened up. Questions like, what are my values? What does accountability look like? How does my style reflect my values? What do I owe my audience, and what do I owe myself? Basically, what do I owe others, and what do I owe myself? It's a bit more complicated than matching shoes in a bag. Growing up, my siblings and I had a great childhood. It was surrounded with love and adventure. Interwoven within this was my faith. My grandfather was a sheikh, an Islamic scholar, and his love for God were his legacy. We've all heard of intergenerational trauma. Now imagine intergenerational compassion. A few weeks ago, I had my shoes stolen at the mosque. Of course, I was a little angry, a little outraged, and when I had told my dad about this, his response was, "Forgive them and move on, Baba." It's hard to stay angry. This intergenerational compassion was embedded into me. It became one of the reasons why I even wanted to pursue fashion. I had made an alias Instagram account, I'm the Covered Girl, as a platform to express myself, but soon this fun blog turned into my current career. I've worked with brands like Gucci, Fendi, Valentino. I was the first Muslim hijabi bride in Vogue Australia, and I've accumulated over Thank you. And I've accumulated over 380,000 followers across platforms. It's been a liberating and yet challenging experience. Being a content creator means I have to answer these questions to stay true to my values. Taking a value-led approach to fashion means taking personal accountability. Working in fashion requires you to consistently sell. Sell your brand, sell your clothes, sell your looks. Having a platform comes with a lot of responsibility. I use my platform to discuss political, environmental, and humanitarian causes. But as I began to work with bigger brands, I had realized I needed to actively implement my values. Palestine has been important to me since I can remember. Although I'm Lebanese and I'm not Palestinian, being a Muslim embeds a strong sense of justice in you. Last year, with the rise of injustice, I had realized my own hypocrisies. I had contracts worth tens of thousands of dollars locked in with brands who had been harmful to Palestinians. I, of course, stepped away from these contracts, lost a lot of money, but I would do it again and again and again because it's what's right. I've also had brands stall contracts with me due to my political values. I'm, of course, still learning, still growing, but I will continue to ensure that my choices reflect my values. Thrifting has been a key part in how my style and clothes reflect my values. My mum would always take my sisters and I to the op shop, and we would buy anything from clothes, shoes, bags, books. Now I go thrifting with a different mindset. It's no longer a budget decision, but it's a way I express myself. If there's a trend I want to try, I'll go to an op shop first. As a Muslim, being sustainable and reflecting on buying choices is very important. Islam suggests that we live lightly, acquire what we need, and be on earth as a traveller. In a world of micro trends and fast fashion, buying a thrifted piece becomes an act of rebellion. Thrifting slows down the fashion cycle and brings focus to more environmentally conscious choices when shopping. Thrifting has been a key part in my self-expression, but it's been an outward representation of my values. My platform is a reflection of my values. I've only ever known my relationship with myself and God as an adult in the public eye. Meshing the physical with the spiritual is never easy. I use my platform as a clear representation of how I want to represent Islam. The vision for my platform is clear. I want to show that modest fashion is normalized and accessible, that my audience's values can be expressed through their style. When I'm on set or creating content, I'll make sure to ask for bigger sizes so that everything is more loosely fitted. I'll make sure to cover up more of my ankles, my neck, even though in my everyday life, I might be comfortable with that. My perspective is, if I can cover up more and do the campaign, then I'm staying true to my values. Just taking a breather, guys. Thanks. There is a responsibility for how you wear the hijab on a public platform, and I'll continue to ensure that how I wear it reflects my values. There's a fine line between intent and legacy, and exploiting the hijab in a financial or tokenistic way. I've always had to ask myself, how am I embodying my values for myself whilst working in fashion? I've never gone online and felt better spiritually or religiously, because the internet is not a religious safe space. I do have a sisterhood relationship with my followers, and I'm aware of the responsibility, but I've never fully shared my spirituality online. My private life is for my spirituality. I don't go on my phone as much as I seem to. I love spending time with my family and going to the mosque. I make sure to invest in my relationship with God and my personal routine far more. Taking a value-centric approach to fashion means me being compassionate with myself, but also not losing the foundation of all my values, Islam. For me, it's not just a fit or a post. Fashion is a direct reflection of my values. It's how I disrupt the industry, create a safe space for myself and for my audience, enforce boundaries and accountability. Every day as a content creator, I am consistently redefining, reaffirming, and rediscovering my values. Taking a value-centric approach to fashion is me answering the question, what do I owe others, and what do I owe myself?
という音があった。音韻体系の一つとしてあった音が次第に失われ、この土地の方言として残った。私の母、私のおば、私のおばたち、私の祖母、母方は皆発音を残す。今の人々はこれもできない。両親を震わせる虫の音のようなかすれた息。こう言ってくださいよ。違う違う違う違う違う。こうよ。全然違う。すみません。もう一度。聞き分けることはできても、を発音することは私にはできない。
That beautiful film was The Lost Sound by Steffi Yu. So our next speaker is going to knock your socks off. And I know that because I've never said that phrase until I met Jack. Jack is the founder of Jack's Mates, and at age 14, he's the youngest speaker we've ever had on the stage. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Can you guys please be super upstanding for Jack Byrne?
Do you remember when you were 10 years old, playing soccer with your mates, watching your favourite cartoon after school, begging your parents for McDonald's on a Friday night? Well, when I was 10 years old, I started a national charity. In 2018, I'd watched a BTN clip about the drought, seeing people in my own country suffer. So I decided to act. I went home to speak with my mum. We both had no idea what was going on. So once again, I decided to act. I went into my room and wrote an email with the idea of getting people to dress up like farmers and bring in $5 to put an end to this drought. I put my mum's mobile number and name at the bottom. That was a little detail I left out at dinner that night. The next day, my mum's phone went nuts. Within 18 hours, I was on national TV, giving my idea and sharing it to everyone. It was here that I realised I may not have been affected by the drought personally, but I felt the need to help. Clearly, others did too. I also worked out that I may be small, but my voice was mighty. I decided to share my idea, scream it off rooftops. I was just a kid. That was my advantage. I think of it this way, a lemonade stand. When you run a lemonade stand as a kid, people want to support it. Whereas if my dad was to do a lemonade stand, people would have some questions. After all of this, I was doing speeches, talking to people, and I was learning. But I missed a couple speeches, I stuffed up a couple times, I failed. But I talked to my primary school principal and he told me that's not what fail means. Fail actually stands for your first attempt in learning. I was just a kid. I wasn't going to be able to knock everything out of the park. I was still learning. Sometimes adults give up at this point, but as kids, we have this great resilience and we bounce back and push even harder. So that's exactly what I did. While this was all happening, I had a team of mums, cousins, uncles, aunties, all helping me build websites, respond to emails, drive me around places. We'd created something really cool. When I was fundraising at a rugby gala day, walking around with big buckets, I met a man named John Singleton. I had a nice chat to him. I was introduced by my Uncle Steve-O. He donated $50. Hours went by, still donating, walking around with these big buckets, when he asked to speak to me again, this time with my mum. My mum came over and they had a very nice chat while I was watching the footy game in front of me. Mum tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Guess what, Jack? Mr. Singleton wants to donate $50,000. I couldn't believe it. I was just a kid. He saw me, a kid, doing something that no one else was doing. He felt the need to help. Within 5 weeks of launching my initiative, I had 1,200 schools register, 800 kindergartens and 500 workplaces, all because I was a kid. And within 14 hours of starting, I raised $20,000. And at the end of that 5 weeks, I raised $1 million. And to date, I've raised $2.2 million. I'm now a registered charity called Jack's Mates Foundation, who help Australians affected by a natural disaster. Pretty cool. Since starting nearly 5 years ago, I've met so many amazing people and done some really cool things. But my favourite people are farmers. I've been shown into their homes, shown around their farms, and eaten more pub dinners than you can imagine. And on these farmers' darkest days, they still managed to help me, talk to me, because I was a kid. We are the next generation. Adults want to see the perspective of the world through kids' eyes. So, if you have an idea, if you're passionate about something and you believe in it, do it, strive for it. Someone will listen to you. We're a generation of change makers. We're a generation of asking why. So, go for your idea. Step out in the world and do something cool. Thank you for listening.
He's pretty great, yeah. So our next speaker / performance is really good. And I know I keep on saying that, but I've been right every time, so they're really good. Kelvin Tran is the co-founder of the Ching Fong Dragon and Lion Dancing team. I had the privilege of seeing them perform a few weeks back, and they make what is like so physically difficult, like my abs hurt watching them, look like effortless and elegant. So please give a really warm welcome to Kelvin and his team.
I want you to take a moment to close your eyes and transport yourself to the world of Lunar New Year. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Mooncake. Nice. For me, it's the captivating art of lion dancing. It's the pulsating beat of the drum and the gong, combined with the clash of the cymbals. It's the graceful leaps and bounds of the vibrant colored lions. It's a spectacle that leaves you amazed. But despite how graceful it may seem, I came to learn just how difficult it is to perform. As a child, though, I was completely mesmerized by this art. I vividly remember begging my parents to let me watch line dance videos. And there's one CD in particular that stands out in my memory. On the cover of this CD was a striking black and green lion, seemingly leaping out at me. And within this cover contained the performances of a line dance competition that ignited my passion for the art. This passion eventually led me on to an incredible journey. At the age of 8, I didn't start a charity. What I did do, though, was convince my parents to enroll me and my sisters into a martial arts and line dance school. Now, as I was line dancing, I came to learn just how difficult it is to perform. And when people first watch a line dance performance, they're often filled with a sense of awe. And just like wide-eyed 8-year-old me, they're inspired to give it a crack themselves. But many soon discover just how difficult it is to perform, and they end up giving up on the art. Over the past 15 years of my line dance journey, I've also seen young people increasingly disconnect from their culture. With the rise of social media and the use of TikTok and Instagram hogging up people's minds, the reality is that young people would much rather prefer spending their time doing something a lot more simpler than practicing a traditional cultural art. This is why our cultural arts are struggling to stay alive. But I'm here today to ensure that my art and your unique cultural art continues to live on even beyond our generation. My name's Kelvin Tran, and I'm the co-founder of Ching Fong Dragon and Lion Dance team, a team that's composed primarily of young people aged between 16 to 25 years old. We are proud to call Southwest Sydney our home, specifically the Mingye Lei Temple in Bonneric. In my team, I've seen how lion dance has created a vital bridge that connects young people with our family and with our culture. For many first-generation Australians living in traditional ethnic households, communicating with our families and connecting with our culture can be an immense challenge, especially due to language barriers. But through the art of lion dance, we've been able to bridge this gap. These lion dancers, having the passion, the enjoyment in performing, we've been able to communicate with our parents and connect with our culture. It's a language that's allowed us to speak to our elders. It's a thread that weaves our past and our present together, allowing us to maintain our cultural identity. Now, despite how difficult it seems, this passion has led us onto some incredible things. It's allowed us to provide a platform for cultural exchange. And this is why it is so important to ensure that our cultural arts continue to live on. To ensure that lion dance continues to live on, I've had to modernize the way that lion dancing is taught and performed. Despite being a traditional cultural art, I've had to challenge traditional methods. By embracing modern approaches, we've been able to adapt to the needs of young people and make our cultural art more accessible. Drawing on my background as a personal trainer, I've developed new training styles which resonate better with young people who may not have any martial arts or line dance experience. Instead of holding a horse dance like this for 30 minutes, we've developed a boot camp style of training which still targets the physical needs for line dancing. I've also focused on creating a safe space for young people in my community to develop skills beyond just line dancing. In my team, I've seen shy, timid individuals become strong and independent young people who now help lead my team. By fostering a family-like environment, I've also seen lifelong friendships being developed amongst our young members. Although these developments have been great, there have still been times along my journey when I've questioned whether to continue line dancing. Balancing it with my career and the demands of everyday life have been seemingly impossible at times. But witnessing the profound impact that it has had on young people in my community, I can positively say that it is all worth it. Now, before I step off the stage, I want to urge you, if you have a unique cultural art, to get involved. Yes, there may be challenges along the way, but you'll be on a journey to build lifelong friendships, make memorable experiences, and develop a deeper connection to your roots. Together, let us preserve and revitalize the treasures of our heritage. Together, let us be the torchbearers of our legacies. And I hope that the spirit of lion dance inspires you to dance to the rhythm of your own cultural heartbeat.
So that brings our session 1 to an end. Before you guys all get up, I just have a couple of things to tell you. So we have a bunch of really amazing activities to do out in the courtyard, run by our amazing partners, the University of Sydney. They have this really cool live artwork event where they've paired up with local street artists to kind of bring your image of what the future will look like to life. So if you go out there, tell them your idea, and the best ideas will get actually painted live. There are 5 University of Sydney hoodies that are up for grabs, so definitely get involved with that. Also, make sure you check out the Big Ideas Parramatta stage, hosted by the City of Parramatta, where you'll be hearing some young people, young people from Western Sydney pitch their big idea about the future of Parramatta. I hope you guys have had a really good session. Make sure that you take your bags with you. There's no saving seats unless you're with a group, but make sure you take all your stuff. I won't promise that I won't go into your bags and steal snacks if you guys leave them here. That's a joke. I will not do that. That's a criminal. But it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for being such an amazing audience. Can you guys all give a standing ovation for yourselves? And we'll see you next session. Thank you so much.
How awesome was that first half? I hope, yes. I hope you're all feeling as sufficiently bad about yourself as I am. Now we're seeing 14-year-olds change the world, but I've got the afternoon to question my 30 years of life, so that's okay. I'm Eve. I'm one of the head curators here at the TEDx Youth event, and I'm joined with the awesome Astra, who's one of our 11 youth curators. So we've selected 11 curators who have volunteered their time to select and find and scout out the amazing speakers and performers here today. So can we please give all the curators and all of the volunteers here at TEDx Sydney a huge round of applause.
Hey everyone, I'm really excited to be up here. I'm going to be a little bit upfront with all of you. I'm a queer 17-year-old. I'm really used to having adults not listen to me or even really value my opinions. And I'm sure a lot of you in the audience feel the same way. Well, what if our next speakers actually told us young queer people that we actually have history on our side? I'm feeling really honoured to introduce Rudy and Hannah from Rainbow History Club to you all. They have created something really special with this club, and they upload a lot of videos to TikTok, which currently has over 700,000 followers and 13 million likes, which is pretty impressive. They're funny, powerful, inspiring, and they help you win an argument. Please welcome Rainbow History class.
How did one of the most ubiquitous words of the English language come to be so controversial?
They, them is such an absurd concept. How can you be a plural?
It is really sinister.
Mainstream publications completely mangle the English language deliberately. It's madness. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have thought this was possible.
Welcome to Rainbow History class. My name's Hannah, my pronouns are she, her, and my name is Rudy Jean Rigg, and my pronouns make conservatives very angry. So we've seen a rise in trans and non-binary people using they, them pronouns to refer to themselves over the last decade or so. And I don't know about you, but I've definitely heard people tell me that it's grammatically incorrect. But what if I told you that it wasn't grammatically incorrect and those pronouns aren't even that new? The fact is, they've been causing drama for a very, very long time.
That's right. Now, the first piece of drama surrounding our gender-neutral singular pronoun they is the fact that it was stolen from Vikings. That's right. Back when we spoke Old English, we didn't have a gender-neutral pronoun, and people really wanted one. So they looked to their enemy's language, Old Norse, and took it from there. Now, the word they was probably spoken long before it was ever written down, right? But it made its debut on the page in a very queer-sounding medieval romance called William and the Werewolf, which dates back to 1375, or 647 years ago.
Yeah, people were using they, them pronouns to refer to those that they didn't know the gender of, people, circumstances where gender wasn't relevant or needed to be concealed. But the people using these pronouns weren't grammatical heathens, because you know who was using it, Hannah?
You're going to tell us, Rudy.
William Shakespeare, the guy who wrote Romeo and Juliet, and he's pretty important to the English language.
Do we have time for me to recite a little Shakespeare, Rudy?
Only if you do it properly.
Do I do things any other way? Stand back. This one's from Hamlet. "'Tis meet that some more audience than a mother, since nature makes them partial, should hear the speech of vantage." Thank you.
I just got shivers down my spine and I got thrown back to high school theatre class. I don't know how I feel, but anyway, thank you for that, Hannah.
Basically, you're welcome. So, even though Shakespeare is kind of like the English language's model student, it's not like he cared that much about speaking perfect English, because if he needed a word to describe an idea or an image or a feeling, well, he kind of just made one up.
Yeah, like moonbeam, savagery, obsequious, lonely and obscene, which actually kind of sound like a queer haiku. I didn't think about that.
That's true. I'm going to put that in my diary. The fact that he gave so many new words to the English language is one of the reasons why we consider him such a literary genius. His work shows us how we can change language to better express ourselves and articulate the future that we want to create for ourselves.
Future. Actually, that just rings a bell in my mind. He would have known what words that we would need in the future.
I actually can't believe we're doing this at TED.
I have got a presentation for you all, so please excuse me.
No, this
now
is
it's
your moment.
turn to move in the back. Hi, my name's Rudy, and welcome to my TED Talk. What if I told you that William Shakespeare was alive and well and with us today? Take a look at this. Example A, William Shakespeare. And example B, a man named Adam Shulman. Now, there's a very compelling case that Adam Shulman is actually the reincarnation of William Shakespeare. Now, William Shakespeare, the original one, he was married to a woman named Anne Hathaway. And who's Adam Shulman married to? The star, yes, the star of Devil Wears Prada herself, Anne Hathaway 2.0. Now, the evidence goes further. Yes, it's very compelling. Coincidence?
Unlikely.
I think not. So, this has come to us via two of the most reliable sources of truth that we have at our fingertips: Twitter and a free morphing app from the App Store. I rest my case. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And we're done. So using the word they to describe individual people back in Shakespeare's day was A-OK. But in the 1600s, after Shakespeare died, or at least began his transformation into Adam Schulman, the pronoun they found itself at the root of drama once more.
Because at the time, English was like kind of a second-rate language. Like, how do you say it? Like a language for losers?
It was a language for losers.
Yeah, and I don't know. They didn't even think that it was worthy of having grammar. So that's where they were.
That's exactly right. But in the 1600s, England was getting more and more powerful. So people started to think, well, maybe English was big enough to, get its own grammar. So the linguists that were put in charge of writing down the English language grammar got to work modelling it on Latin grammar, which they found really hard, two different languages, and it made them feel really kind of bad and insecure that, English would never be as good as Latin.
No, and so they had a well-spoken tantrum about it and continued to demand that English be more like Latin. The thing is, with Latin, there is no gender-neutral pronoun because every single word in Latin has a gender.
Now, if you've never had the opportunity to learn a Latin language, then the idea of every word having a gender might seem kind of confusing. So don't worry, we have prepared a reenactment of how we assume every word was given its gender.
So Hannah and I want to welcome you today and thank you for coming to our gender reveal party. We are so proud to be parents of this chair, and we can't wait to share this special moment with you.
I can't believe the day's finally come.
I've been waiting. You do it, I can't bear it.
I can't even look. Oh my God.
What do we think it's gonna be?
What do we think it's gonna be?
It's a girl!
It's a girl!
Quick, send it to ballet and don't let it play with Lego. Now that, like all gender reveal parties, are pretty ridiculous, but I do wish that they did it like that.
I know, I can't wait till we all come back here again and do it for the table. So English scholars looked to the very prestigious Latin as goals. And so they were insecure as they were, they continued to demand we make English more like Latin, which means dumping the gender-neutral singular pronoun they in favour of just he and she.
Yeah, but we still needed a generic, gender-neutral pronoun for both men and women because they were making things like laws, which needed something that would apply to everyone. And so they go, oh, no, we can do it. We've got a solution to this issue. And now these scholars, being all men, what do they do, Hannah?
I have no idea what they decided the pronoun should be.
Well, they just went ahead and was like, no, we've got one. He and him. Yeah, we'll put them down. So they decided that he and him or he and laws would be the generic pronoun used for everyone. So they got to work changing the laws.
And here is where we enter pronoun drama number 3. You see, these male scholars walked right into a trap, a grammatical trap, set by a bunch of scheming feminists known as the suffragettes. So in the late 1800s in the US as well as the UK, these women were campaigning for their right to vote, and they got smart. They figured, well, if the pronoun he was generic and applied to everyone, then surely the laws surrounding his right to vote should apply to them too.
Got him.
That's right. And so, I don't know though, it didn't go down quite as planned, but One of the reasons that I love this story so much is because it's another example in history of how we have used language and grammar to lobby for the rights of marginalised people, which is very similar to what we're doing at the moment, which is using pronouns to advance the inclusion of transgender and non-binary people.
Yeah, but the thing is with the suffragettes, these lawmakers and linguists, they were like, again, they had a solution to the problem. And so they went, no. He and him can be used to include women, except when women needed to be excluded, which is pretty confusing.
Would have been less confusing to just allow women to vote, but no, this is what they came up with. And if we go right up until the 1970s, the pronoun he was still used as the generic pronoun. But you can imagine that in the 1970s, we're in the middle of second wave feminism. These feminists were really not having a bar of the pronoun he being the generic pronoun. But the scholars at all of the leading universities still didn't want to lose their prestigious Latin language vibes and return to they.
No, and so we ended up using or trying out a bunch of different pronouns like thon, ze, here, and some of which actually were adopted by the trans and non-binary community. But the thing is, nothing went as mainstream as they them pronouns did. Now, unfortunately, the media can tend to think that trans and non-binary people are, going ahead and mangling the integrity of the English language, but the fact is, apart from a small group of Latin superfans, we've always wanted a gender-neutral pronoun.
That's right. The video we played at the start of this lesson accused trans people and their allies of mangling the English language. But language is self-mangling. If it didn't get mangled, we'd all still be speaking Shakespearean English, and you could all sound as good as I did at the beginning. That's the thing about language. It adapts and it changes and it evolves to stay alive. Latin, on the other hand, died. Or at least dissolved into French.
So there you have it.
I'm Hannah McElhinney.
I'm Rudy Jean Rigg, and that was a very long-winded way of telling you all that my pronouns are they, them. Thank you for coming to class.
Next up, we have Winnie Dunn. Winnie is this outrageously talented and skilled Tongan Australian artist, writer, and activist. She devotes herself to sharing the powerful freedom of art and writing with First Nations people and people of colour. And one of the ways she achieves this is by being the general manager of Sweatshop. Sweatshop is this literacy movement that empowers people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds through the power of art and writing. Everyone, please welcome Winnie Dunn.
Mount Druitt is the place art goes to die. Or so I thought as an aspiring artist from the area. Malo Lele, my name is Winnie Dunn, and I'm a Tongan Australian writer, editor, and arts worker. My life's work at Sweatshop Literacy Movement is to empower First Nations artists and artists of colour through reading, writing, and critical thinking. I am inspired by the African-American feminist and scholar Bell Hooks, who argued that we cannot talk about freedom and justice in any culture unless we are talking about mass-based literacy movements. because degrees of literacy determine how we see what we see. Degrees of literacy determine how we see what we see. Growing up, I didn't see myself, a mixed-race Tongan woman, represented in any books, films, television shows, or media. The representation I did see were negative portrayals of Pacifica Australians and Western Sydney residents as nothing but violent criminals or unemployed doll bludgers. From Plumpton High Babies, the ABC-funded program about teenage pregnancies in my local high school, to Struggle Street, the SBS-funded show that depicted Mount Druitt residents as nothing but illiterate and drug addicted, to the infamous Summer Heights High, the popular mockumentary show created by Anglo-Saxon Australian comedian Chris Lilly, who donned an afro wig, brown face paint, and a thick fob accent to enact racist, hypersexual, and violent depictions of Pacifica children. Growing up with that kind of media really, really weighed on me. And I thought that being Tongan and coming from Western Sydney meant I was nothing. So what's the alternative? The controversial crew 1-4 gives us an example. 1-4 were Australia's first and biggest all-Pacifica dual rap crew from Mount Druitt. And to get to know them a little bit, I thought I would share some lyrics with you from one of their most popular songs, The Message. Retaliation is a must, ain't no maybe ifs or buts. Took numerous trips around there, but lad, that's something I can't discuss. I don't want to end up in cuffs. We heartless, wrong or right, regardless, yeah, I'ma back my blood. In 2019, 1-4 rose to prominence with their staunch, dark, and nihilistic Western Sydney lyrical slang. A 2770 tribute to the Southside Chicago and UK-style drill rap. Their sudden rise to fame, however, led to a moral panic among a certain kind of Australian who argued that their music was nothing but a call to crime and shut down every one of their potential concerts. So how is this any different from the media that I was talking about earlier? I actually remember watching The Message for my first time with my 5 sisters and 2 brothers. Mount Druitt Station, Mount Druitt Courthouse, the Dawson's Mall behind Mount Druitt Westfields were lit up in bright orange smoke flares. On screen, in that light, places I had been to all my life suddenly looked new and beautiful. And then my sister stood up and showed a sign. 1-4. She stood straighter than I'd ever seen her. But of course, then our brother in his dry-fit Gucci cap and his Nike trackies and his gleaming TNs scoffed and said, "Those boys are hard, but they're still just acting." And I didn't know it back then, but my brother had touched on something fundamentally missing from the critique and even support of 1-4. They are a performance. Sweatshop's founding director and award-winning author, Dr. Michael Muhammad Ahmed, wrote extensively about the performance of violence in young leb boys from southwest Sydney, an intersection he comes from. He analysed the front page of the Daily Telegraph, where these boys, who look a lot like the boys in 1-4, argued that buying a gun in Sydney was easier than buying a pizza. And journalists took them seriously. With the ongoing negative media attention against Arab and Muslim communities in Western Sydney, Muhammad argued that this image is a prime example of protest masculinity. Youthful, masculine language and behaviour that comes from a deep sense of frustration, injury, and defensiveness caused by racism and marginalisation. Put simply, young minoritised men perform the gangster because it is empowering to scare racist white people. This is at the core of Onefour's work. They even tell us at the beginning of the message with a disclaimer. This video is made for entertainment purposes only. The lyrics and characters in this song are fictional and should not be taken literally. If only that certain kind of Australian was paying attention. As Onefour were amassing millions of views, the New South Wales Police Force took it upon themselves to initiate a specialised task force that researched into how knife crime was influenced by rap culture. They also took lyrics from the message and other songs and used it as legal evidence in a court trial that saw some Onefour members incarcerated, in part because of their creative choices. The New South Wales Police also had a hand in banning rap music, the entire genre, at the 2023 Royal Easter Show. Onefour responded in a now deleted Instagram post. They want us to get off the streets, but they won't give us a chance to. When white people take everything that First Nations people and people of colour have to say literally, they deprive us of the right to be creative. And because creativity is what makes us human, they deprive us of our humanity. First Nations people and people of colour have the right to decide how we make art, when we make art, why we make art, and for whom we make art. We have the right to make art in direct response to racism and white supremacy. We have the right to be figurative, metaphorical, polemical, hyperbolic, ironic, sardonic, histrionic, critical, cynical, and critical. Our art is a reflection of our reality, and our reality is our humanity.
Next up, we have a really exciting performance from Yasmina Siddiqui and her band. You know those songs you listen to where the singer's voice just kind of sounds like liquid gold? Yeah, that's literally Yasmina. Her voice is like silk, and I'm not even joking. She's just one of those rare and insanely passionate artists who have such a skill and talent for what they love, music. Yasmina experiments with jazz and neo-soul, and she brings this really unique sound to hip-hop music. And her songs, they have this beauty to them, but really heartfelt and genuine and raw and touching lyrics. It's really special. Everyone, please welcome Yasmina Siddiqui and her band.
picking at my skin. Let me open my wounds for you. Dig your blades underneath my skin. You put the salt into our hearts, they talk, poison on their tongue. Love is meant for spineless people. Leave it to the young. I play the fool. And he wouldn't mind. He'd watch me bleed out. Creates a pool at his feet. No emotion on his face. Turns away, watches me bleed out. Wants me or not at all. Wants me or not at all. Talking to the walls. This world makes me feel so small. Jealous eyes, they scandalize me. Sees me through his vicious lens. Dark creatures guide him back into the palms of one who's lost love. My heart on my, oh please can you give up? Sad missive, this he wishes, prefers me quiet instead. My power does not serve him. His insecurities deserve him. My power does not serve him. He wouldn't mind. He'd watch me bleed out. Creates a pool at his feet. No emotion on his face. Turns away, watches me bleed out. Just one part of me, take it for free. Use me like you use my boy. Caught in my web, his wishes are repressed. Does not want me, he'd rather me dead. this piece of me. I wonder why time won't let
Youth have more opportunities than ever before to reimagine the world as we know it. However, this promise requires a fundamental shift in the ways in which we engage with change-making as a human race. And I'm going to tell you why. When I was in 8th grade, I embarked on a journey that forever changed my life. As a good-willed 14-year-old, I dedicated much of my free time to supporting those experiencing homelessness. What started out as a food and supply drive with local volunteers evolved into a national nonprofit committed to ending student homelessness through education and advocacy. By the time I was 19, I had raised over $500,000 for our programming, educated over 15 million through our awareness programs, and supported the higher education journey of hundreds of youth experiencing homelessness across the country. As a high school student, I was overseeing full and part-time staff, securing sponsorships from Fortune 500 companies and major foundations. I won global awards and received letters from US presidents. And I even recruited some of America's most influential sector leaders for our board of directors. A simple desire to do good became a full-fledged nonprofit organization that was now responsible for creating a better life for many youth experiencing homelessness in America. This was the work that got me into Harvard, and that's when things started to change. As Equal grew during my college years, I began to become more weary of the efficiency of our work. You see, I was raising money from the same corporations that were, directly or indirectly, contributing to America's housing crisis. I was receiving checks from people who likely didn't even vote in favor of legislation that would support structural ends for homelessness. And many of our donors were far more interested in the optics of their support for youth homelessness rather than the real structural change that was necessary to make. So I became the Social Responsibility Initiative of the Year and their way of checking the charity box, paving the path for these groups to continue to perpetuate the very problem I was trying to solve. And I was powerless in holding them accountable for how their line of work was actually harming youth homelessness. As I was realizing these inconsistencies, an even more depressing realization came about. Many of my peers considered my nonprofit work the kind of advocacy that would be necessary in order to change the world. And it was this unanimous support for impact being some sort of compartmentalized part of our daily lives that made me realize how unsustainable our current approach to change making actually is. You see, everyone is ready to donate, even though we all acknowledge that charity practice is quite short-lived. And maybe it's because we know it's a mask for the desperately needed political and institutional change that can only happen if we all begin to scrutinize our own approaches, practices, and even professions. So if we truly desire to create a better future, we have to think about social change as the intention and the engine of the spaces we enter, not the bonus at the end of the year or the afterthought of the meeting. Our world is desperately asking us to add impact to our 24-hour clock because we can't just donate our way out of this anymore. I promise you, billionaire philanthropists won't bring us closer to a more just world, but the embrace of widespread accountability and commitment to doing good in all facets of our life will. So in the same way that my experience in the nonprofit sector was not as impactful as I would have hoped, it makes me wonder what other sectors are equally beneficial in creating a better future for us all. Too often, we assume the line of well-paid financial advisors, creative artists, high-paced executives of corporations, these are all ill-equipped for making the fruitful change that we need. And I think it's the exact opposite. So what I hope you will take away from my story is now that the responsibility is on all of us, no matter where we work or who we work for.
Hello, that was Matine Kalagi. He submitted a TikTok as part of our TikTok ideas search. So thank you to him and everyone who submitted something for that. So next up, we have Dan Brockwell. Dan is the founder of Early Work, an educational organisation that helps new graduates find jobs in the tech industry. Please give a huge round of applause to Dan.
The average person over the course of their lifetime works 80,000 hours. That might look like 40 hours a week for 48 weeks a year for over 40 years of your life. At an individual level, that is one of the biggest factors in human happiness. But a study run by Gallup last year with over 100,000 employers found that 60% of people feel emotionally detached at work, and 1 in 5 people feel miserable. Now, hating work is such a bizarrely common theme in our pop culture, right? And unless you think that all jobs suck, clearly there's something a little bit broken about how we decide what work to do. So where does the problem start? My hypothesis? Most people don't try enough jobs to know what they really like. In a study run by Indeed, 88% of people who switch careers feel happier after making the move. So perhaps the secret to finding your dream career isn't following your passion, but experimenting, right? To work out what sorts of problems, what sorts of environments, what goals, and what skills resonate most with you. My name is Dan. I run a school and community helping thousands of young people find their dream careers in tech. Here are the 5 most important lessons I've learned in experimenting to design my dream career. Lesson number 1. Work-related experience is as important as work experience. I want you to raise a hand if you've ever seen an entry-level job asking for multiple years of experience. That's a lot of hands. Whoa. Hang on, so you need an experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience. What's going on here? We need to break through this barrier by actually rethinking what experience we consider relevant. And when you take a look at some of the most desired skills that employers look for in junior roles, you'll see things like sales, marketing, events, project management, writing, speaking. And the funny thing is, these skills are things you can build outside of work. You think about leadership roles, extracurriculars, volunteering, and side projects, and all of these can be as important as work experience when you're interviewing. Forget unpaid internships where you're giving away value without being fairly rewarded. Instead, build work-relevant experience doing the things you already love. For me, doing things like Model UN and business case competitions, running a social soccer club, even starting a Reddit community had a huge impact on my ability to land my first few jobs. So if you're struggling to find that first job, start testing work-relevant skills with different hobbies and see what resonates with you. From there, we move on to the job search journey. Lesson number 2 is don't wait for a job listing. Make the job listing. One of the biggest misconceptions I see young people make when it comes to their career is only applying for jobs that have a job listing. When you look at job boards, they are the tip of the iceberg of potential jobs that are out there for you. And here's the thing. Fast-growing companies will often have needs that aren't being met, and they're growing so quickly that they haven't even thought about putting up a job listing yet. So what can you do about that? Reach out to them and create your own job opportunity. Whether that's LinkedIn, email, social media, you have a chance to pitch yourself. And when it comes to doing that, remember the 3 W's: who you are, why you're reaching out, and what's in it for them. I had 4 different internships over uni that I kind of stumbled into without really having a proper job listing. I'm going to walk through an example of what that can look like. I saw a Facebook ad in my second year of university for an app that helped you order and pay for foods while at the restaurant. And I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. So I started sharing it with my friends. I shared it with my university discussion group. And then I thought, hang on a minute, what if I reach out to the person running this company? So I messaged them on LinkedIn, and I asked for an internship. Fast forward about a week, and we were at a Westfield food court, probably not the most conventional interview format, but somehow ended up in a paid marketing internship for 6 months as a result of that. So if you want to have the best chance at experimenting with different careers, create your own job opportunities. Now, lesson number 3 is then studying different jobs like you study different subjects, right? I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I was starting out in uni. So I tried a bunch of different jobs, sales, marketing, project management, product management, design, consulting. I didn't even know what half of these things meant when I was starting out uni. But the funny thing is, every single one of those jobs has taught me skills that I'm now using in my role today. The beautiful thing is that testing jobs allows you to work out what you like and what you don't like, which is equally important, right? That might be the industry you're working in. It might be the culture of the company size, maybe the skills you're using. For me, this industry learning was way more useful than the theoretical learning I was getting at university. I was building practical skills, owning my own projects, and putting things into the hands of real people. So I realized for me that sometimes work is actually the best form of school. So if you're sitting there and you feel like traditional education isn't the right fit for you, that's totally normal, right? You have a chance to test out different careers like you test out different subjects. But how do you ensure that you can get those opportunities and stand out? Lesson number 4 is that content creation increases career luck. Now, finding a job as a young person is freaking tough these days. But it's not what you know, nor is it who you know. It's who knows you and what they know you for. I believe creating an audience is the single biggest thing you can do to give yourself a career advantage. And by having an audience and putting out content, you'll get exposed to more career opportunities to experiment and help you along the way. Now, when I was in university, I was not a big social media person. I literally did not know how to do an Instagram story. But I started a newsletter to help just 10 friends find jobs in tech more easily, because I saw they were struggling with it and I thought I could help. Little by little, that newsletter helped me meet my co-founders, get my first customers, and make lifelong friends along the way. When you create content about the things you care about, other people who care about those things will find you. And you don't need to be a top 1% expert. Everyone has something to say. That is super, super important. Chances are, each one of you has a niche hobby or a niche interest that you know a little bit more about than most of your mates. So start sharing what you're learning today, and you will expose yourself to career opportunities you never otherwise thought you would have had. Sometimes that can even mean starting a company. And my final lesson is that when companies start, they don't look like companies. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are curious maybe about starting your own business one day. I know, sitting in your shoes, I was. But, it's tricky to work out, how do you even get this thing off the ground, right? The thing is, you don't need a decade of work experience to get started. I was kind of 1 year out of university. I was a graduate at a tech company. And for me, I just decided that was the right time to go all in on my side project. But, like finding the right job, finding the right business takes time. I had a huge amount of imposter syndrome when I started my little newsletter, but little by little, that side project turned into a real business. My newsletter helped me launch an online community. That online community then helped me launch multiple hiring services for companies. And those hiring services now help me launch a school to help people land their first jobs in tech. So when starting a business, find a problem that pisses you off, think about the simplest solution, and just start experimenting from there. Now, it can be overwhelming to work out all this dream career stuff, right? But you don't need the answers on day one. Start learning what you like, start learning what you don't like, and then maybe try something different that you think you might like a little bit more. And the thing is, everyone's career experiment is going to look different. You might really value social impact, financial success, learning, work-life balance, culture, but that doesn't mean your friends are going to value the exact same things. So don't worry too much about what your peers are testing and focus on the right test for you. You won't find your dream career overnight, but you've got 80,000 hours to work it out. And the sooner you start trying new things, the closer you'll get to your dream career. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Dan. We've got a couple more speakers to go, so bear with us. Up next, we have the absolutely wonderful Western Sydney local and mental health advocate, Vfam.
Mental health is not an Asian concept. Food is an Asian concept. How many of you here have attended a family gathering and instead of being asked, how are you, you got asked, have you eaten? For me, growing up in Vietnam, the phrase ăn gì chưa or have you eaten is the most common way for people to start a conversation and connect with each other. Food is how we express our feelings. Are we happy and full, fed and well cared for? Or are we sad and hungry? Do we need to care for someone by serving food? Vietnam is a nation that has suffered extensive tragedy. Back when the Vietnam War finishes in 1975, people were famished and resources sacred. To survive was to have something to eat. And if you were surviving, you were doing better than being dead. Dark times. Decades have passed and Vietnam is no longer trapped in war. However, the phrase "Ăn gì chưa?" or "Have you eaten?" has been culturally integrated and passed down to generations. It is the Vietnamese version of "Are you okay?" When I was around 12, I remember telling my mom, "Mom, I'm sad." And she said, "Did you eat? You had a roof over your head, food provided for, and a proper education. Why are you still sad, huh? Back in my time, when I was your age." I'm sure many of us have heard that before. At the time, I felt invalidated. Only now do I understand that it wasn't because my mom didn't care about me. I know she does, in her own ways. It was because my mom grew up in a time and place where having basic needs met was the definition of survival and contentment. Emotional needs, it wasn't on the survival list, virtually non-existent. Learning to talk to my mom about mental health has been a difficult journey, and it is still a work in progress. I remember when I was invited to be a keynote speaker for Shout Out, which is a youth mental health event located in Parramatta in collaboration with Headspace. I noticed a pattern. All 5 speakers from different non-Western backgrounds were having difficulty in mental health talk conversation with their families. I was trained for mental health first aid, lifeline suicidal prevention, domestic violence, and emergency response. So that's 4. I am also bilingual, but this has not helped me to communicate mental health events and talks to people from non-Western background. So what is the point of having all of these qualifications and language ability if I still cannot make mental health relatable for the general public, including my Vietnamese family? Well, this is because mental health was originally created for the general Western community with minimal cross-cultural reference. It was developed from early Greek philosophy in the 17th century. It then became a discipline in Germany in 1800, and it then took off in America afterwards. Mental health intersectionality has only begun to gain a momentum in recent years. In particular, the COVID-19 pandemic has created an urgent sense for mental health needs worldwide. Note that a person's willingness to approach mental health is not solely determined by cultural factors. It is also depending on the person's willingness and openness to new experience to help lowering mental health stigma and prejudice. The question is, how can we deconstruct the historically mental health concept into something more relatable for everyone? And this is how I can help. Step 1. Acknowledge that fundamentally, mental health is Western. People from different cultures will have different interpretation of mental health. A healthy state of mind could be a mind that meditated and prayed. It could be a mind that had done physical exercise or is close to religion. Or, like in my culture, a person's well-being is in check if they have not skipped a meal. Note, cultural is not synonymous with language, ethnicity, or religion. People from the same cultural background can also have different cultural processes and individual characteristics. Step 2, ask and observe. How do you take care of yourself? How do people check up on each other? How does a person overcome life difficulties? People will not have the answer to this question right away, but their action will convey their feelings and behaviors over time. Remember, what a person chooses to not say and do are equally important to what a person chooses to say and do. Step 3, be patient. Communication is a two-way street. It takes time for a person to build trust and open up. And once we understand the person's perspective and observe their behaviors, we can then reframe mental health concept into something more relatable for the person using the knowledge we have about them. And if we can relate to their experience better, it will be easier for them to relate to what we are saying. From there, we can tell them something like, "Thank you for sharing your experience. So what can I do to make you feel better?" Finally, mental health talk does not need to be difficult. If you find it awkward to talk to your mental health about your ethnic friends or your families, they'll feel the same way. Approach the topic casually when both of you are most relaxed and comfortable. Timing is key. Reminding them that we're currently living in a world where asking for help is encouraged and reaching out for support is an option. You can say something like, "I know that it is not something you had experienced before, but I find other people from our culture are benefiting from it. Maybe we can give it a try?" Integrating mental health intersectionality is not easy. However, we're living in a world where everything is constantly evolving, and so are we. We are blessed to have more options in dealing with personal difficulties compared to the past, where mental health awareness and support were limited. It is up to the individual to choose when and how they approach mental health. It will take time for these changes to happen, but together, we can help to create a future where mental health is no longer a foreign concept. Thank you.
Alrighty. Up next, we have the CEO and founder of Metaboli, which is an online digital platform which helps prevent heart disease through exercise and lifestyle programs. Please welcome the innovative Tom Barries-Clark.
When I say pandemic, I'm sure there's one thing that comes to mind. But there's something else that isn't nearly as scary, but is killing more people than COVID, cancer, and car crashes. Heart disease. Now, I'm not a cardiologist. I didn't study medicine or health or even science. I also didn't invent a new technology or discover a new method for treating heart disease either. But despite not being an expert, I still founded a health tech company and made it our mission to eliminate heart disease as the leading cause of death. Which might sound strange, because when you think of technology that has had an impact, you probably think of the internet, or penicillin, or probably right now, AI. All advancements which were the product of experts in the field, scientists and engineers who invented or discovered something new to move the needle. But when we look at change solely as the efforts of experts, we're omitting the potential impact of outsiders. Because when you're faced with a problem that's so big that the experts have hit a dead end, sometimes it takes an outsider with fresh eyes to find a new path. Now, heart disease is largely driven by type 2 diabetes, which at the moment is mostly being treated with pharmaceuticals, like insulin and metformin, which can absolutely save lives, but there's a better treatment. One that's twice as effective as these pharmaceuticals, and unlike them, can actually reverse type 2 diabetes. Now, it may or may not surprise you that the most effective treatment isn't some trade secret or infomercial wonder drug. It's in every PDHP textbook. It's eating well and doing regular exercise. Granted, when you have a chronic condition like type 2 diabetes, you can't just jump on a treadmill and cut out lollies. You need a health professional to prescribe you a diet and exercise plan and guide you through your health journey. But we've known about these treatments for decades. And yet for decades, this problem has only gotten worse. Deaths from heart disease have only gone up. If these health plans are so effective, why was metformin the 4th most prescribed drug in the US in 2018? Well, we asked the health professionals for their perspective, and they would usually say, diet and exercise health plans are great, but they don't work because patients always end up dropping off their treatment. And the fact is, only 10% of patients do stick to their treatment, which means despite it being the best method for beating type 2 diabetes, 90% of patients end up dropping off and defaulting to drugs while their condition slowly worsens. Now, I'm absolutely not saying we should question the expertise of these health professionals, because their approach is the most practical reaction to the problem they're facing. But if we take a step back and look at how these health plans are currently being prescribed, this drop-off makes sense. You see, last year I broke my arm, and my physio gave me this piece of paper, a similar format to what a patient with type 2 diabetes would be given, only I was lucky enough to get some photos for reference. A lot of their programs look like this. Now, when I arrived home, it wasn't long before my piece of paper found itself on my desk, and from there into my bin. This is just how things are done. Unfortunately, paper is still the default medium. These patients have just been given a life-changing diagnosis, and then they're expected to embark on a health journey armed with a piece of paper. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. My background is in UX, or user experience design. I don't decide what medication might save or kill a patient. I decide how big buttons should be. I'm an outsider to the healthcare industry, and whilst I don't know what blood lipids put you at greater risk of heart disease, I do know bad design when I see it. And from my perspective, when I look at this problem, I don't see a medical problem. We know the treatment works. I see a design problem. I see a bad experience that's failing to engage users. So if we take that original perspective, health plans are the most effective treatment, but they don't work because patients always end up dropping off, the path to solving the problem is limited, usually to prescribing drugs because at least that does something. But if we take this new path, health plans are the most effective treatment, but the way they are implemented is poorly designed, the problem shifts. We go from how do we make more people stick to these health plans to how can we build better health plans that are easier to stick to. So we took this path and we researched what people need to make progress. And we found that the programs need to be more engaging, and the patients need to feel more accountable to and supported by their clinician. And it certainly doesn't take a UX designer to realize that a piece of paper isn't all that engaging or supportive. So we took this path and we researched what people need to make progress. And we found that patients, But knowing this is only half the equation. How do we build something that actually checks these boxes? Well, if you break these needs down into smaller pieces, it paints a mosaic of existing solutions that we already use on a daily basis. We took the same habit-forming game design principles that make you pick up your phone and doom scroll for hours on end, but rather than using them to incentivize inertia, as so many apps do, instead, our app uses these dopamine hits, these streaks and rewards, to incentivize exercise and a healthy lifestyle. More than just closing rings, we gamified progression to make these health plans more fun and give patients more autonomy. But it's not all about autonomy though either. How do we solve for this clinician-led accountability and ongoing support? Because games and apps only go so far, but project management tools that big businesses use to manage and support ongoing projects, they cracked this problem decades ago. We realized clinicians didn't have any idea how patients were progressing, let alone if they were at risk of dropping off their treatment. So we used these tracking and support concepts to give clinicians detailed insights on patient progress and built an automated flagging system that can detect patient drop-off before it happens. So clinicians can intervene and patients finally stop slipping through the cracks. Now, you can take the outside path to endless problems. It's not just diabetes and heart disease or even just health. As an outsider to any industry, you're not carrying the same bias. Your unique perspective gives you an insight nobody else has. And your path to solving a problem might not be an app, and it certainly doesn't need to be one to begin with, because you don't need expertise or outside investment to start making a change. Once we thought we had a path worth following, we spoke to clinicians and patients, then cobbled together a simple prototype out of forms and online spreadsheets. And then we asked patients and clinicians to try out our program and tested to see if it would make a difference. And despite how slow and manual it was, it did. People enjoyed it and everyone improved their health. We managed to improve weekly steps by 50%, diet by 10%, but most importantly, not a single person dropped off their treatment. We showed the government what we'd done. We showed the government what we'd done, and then they gave us a grant, so that a year later, we could take that simple prototype and turn it into a mobile and web platform used in 2 countries, 3 cities, and counting. When you're solving big problems, you don't always need to be an expert. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes all it takes is finding a new path. Thank you.
What was it like growing up in Mountie for years?
Honestly, nowadays, the game are the same. I'm just sitting reminiscing about back in the days. All of the boys was close.
Most of the stories you hear about Mount Druitt bad, but to us, it's home. We only got in trouble because we got bored. Just there's really nothing out here for us as kids.
I was 14 when I got shot by coppers. Within seconds, I've been shot in the arm, shot in the chest, and then the last word I said was like, boys, I got shot. I didn't get justice for it.
It's rough, it's hard. I don't feel like my voice is heard at all, to be honest. Like, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, there's no support.
The people that could help us are looking at us wrong, but if they were looking at us right, they could help us out. All of these kids and stuff that are falling corrupt for the system, get them out of that cycle.
Help them to understand where we come from. I mean, if we actually listen, you know, it could be a massive change.
People will understand that we're doing these kind of things for a reason, because we don't have them kind of supports that other people do.
It just feels like you can come here and be yourself. Feel like a family out here.
So what you just saw there was a trailer for the Just Reinvest program Mountie Yarns. Mountie Yarns is a youth-led project that gathers stories, expertise and knowledge from young Aboriginal people who have lived experience in the criminal justice system. It's a really, really amazing program, and we're lucky to be joined by one of the young people, Elijah Smith. Hello, how are you going?
Good, yourself?
Good. So tell me a little bit about why you joined Mountie Yarns.
Pretty much, Mountie Yarns is a group led by older boys and girls, and one of the older boys brought me down because he knew I had a story to share.
Cool. And Elijah's about to sing a song for us today, and that's part of the music program within Mountie Yarns. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and about the song you're about to sing?
The music program, it's held on a Monday with a producer, Paper Toys, and it's funded by Just Reinvest. I just pretty much went down there, give me something to do, keep me off the streets.
Yeah, cool.
And my story, my song's about just growing up in Mount Druitt, my story, what I've been through, what I do.
Cool. Well, let's give Elijah a huge round of applause and hear it. Woo!
Everything got done like pain, like fun, no shame. I was starving on that block, watching them oldest face. I was waiting on my fate, thinking when is it much in the 8. I was deep in the streets, I took the leap, learning how to creep. I knew this shit was sweet, too many cases to beat. I always land on my feet, I stand on my own. I'm always alone, I'm in the zone. They tap on my phone, they got me on a drone. My name's well known. Them blue and red lights, they'll give you a fright. If I'm in a whip, I'm taking flight. If I'm on foot, then I'm out of sight. Just like Fox on a Friday night, I'm always ready to ride. This shit makes my mum cry. She knows her son is hurting, search a servant earning. I stay observing, I'm quiet, I'm learning. If I'm in the whip, I'm merging. The straight shit gets disturbing. Me and my brothers are lurking, the coppers stay alert. These coppers stay on patrol for the shit we stole. My pockets stay swole. Can't you nothing but a mold? These pussies need to learn their role. If I got a car, just know it's not a rental. Everything I do is confidential. If you get done, these are the streets fundamentals. The straight shit takes a toll on my mental. That's why I'm rapping on instrumentals. Learn a lot from this game, got no one to blame. Everything I done I claim, got no shame. Put my mum on a plane, for all them nights I put her through pain. Get off that train, use my brain so shit won't be the same. On the block like a low life with a tool in my dacks. Cover my tracks cause I know these jacks are on my back. Up in the trap, flipping packs, tryna make a stack. I'm not stressed when I'm in all black, cause she knows I do a whack and I'll never look back. Born in that 7-0, this is all we know. If you got beef, then have a go. If you're not from here, then we letting it blow. Cops on the chase, that bird is low. Back out 12, screaming fuck you though. Come to the paddock with my bro, we causing havoc, we putting on the show. Lately I've been stressed, finding it hard to express. Everything I touch turns to a mess. Hope this rap shit is a success. This is me flexing, not confessing. Please don't come arresting, keeping them guessing. Life distressing, lawyers sick of defending. Learn a lot from this game, got no one to blame. Everything I done I claim, got no shame. Put my mum on a plane for all the nuts I put her through pain. Get off that train, use my brain so shit won't be the same. Thank you, appreciate it.
Hi everyone, my name is Jada and I'll be one of your hosts for the afternoon session. Our next speaker is an absolute boss lady. Not only is she a lawyer, she's also a PhD student and a proud Wiradjuri woman. She's the first Indigenous woman at her university to undergo a PhD in law and making headlines with her work advocating for Indigenous rights. On top of all of that, she's also won a Supreme Court case, and now she can also add TEDx to her resume. So give it up for Taylor Gray.
Thank you, everyone. Before I even begin, as part of cultural protocol, I have to acknowledge country. And not only do I want to acknowledge country, but I want to honour country. For a land that has sustained and fed and nurtured my people since time immemorable. Are there any First Nations mob in the crowd tonight? I can see a couple of hands. I just want to honour you as well. And I want to honour the Darug Nation. My country is just over the Blue Mountains, and I know we would have shared a lot of connections before colonisation, and we still share it now. So as I begin, I'd like to say, Gowambana, Yama Dumarang, Yuan Yandi Taylor, Baladu Durumandilanya Wiradjuri. Hello, how are you? Are you well? My name is Taylor, and I'm a proud Wiradjuri woman. I'm here today to tell a message of truth. In my language, we don't necessarily say, speak the truth, but what we do say is a concept called Gariyala, which means to speak from the heart. Today, my truth comes from not only as a PhD and lawyer, doing a PhD and my work as a lawyer. It doesn't just come from that, but it comes from my perspective as a Wiradjuri woman. And in my genetic disposition, all I wish to do is take the best possible care of Mother Earth. When I look at Mother Earth, when I look at the land, I don't look at her through the lens of a commodity. I look at her as a living relative, because that is part of my kinship. Native title doesn't allow me to do that. But what is native title? Native title is the legal recognition that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have the right to use the land. And that's it, simply use the land. It means we can hunt on the land, we can fish on the land, we can practice cultural traditions and our law on the land. But it doesn't allow us to mine the land. It doesn't allow us to sell the land. It doesn't give us veto power, which means we can't make any final decisions about the overall well-being of the land. The concept of native title came through a decision as what you may know today as the Mabo decision, which was an outcome that happened in 1992. It is the first time that the highest court of Australia overturned the incorrect legal myth that this country was terra nullius, a Latin term meaning a land belonging to no one. Though the victory of Mabo was short-lived by my people, terra nullius may have been overturned, but the ghost of terra nullius still lingers within the realm of property law when considering my people's rights to land. So where does dispossession live? I asked myself as a naive undergraduate student at the time, angered by the fact that I couldn't come up with an answer to this question, angered by the fact that my people have sent numerous petitions and letters of concern to the address of dispossession, and yet her address remains unknown. So I sat with this question of, where does dispossession live? Because maybe I would make sense of it one day. Maybe I would find an answer. Australians must ask themselves, what is native title? Why am I so fearful of it? Does this mean I'll lose my land? And I'm here to tell you, no, it doesn't mean you'll lose your land. In fact, native title can only be claimed over Crown lands, New South Wales government lands, and not private lands. Because that's not what Mabo did. Mabo gave us the right to use the land, to hunt on the land, to fish on the land, to practice cultural laws on the land. To reiterate, we can't sell the land, we can't mine the land, and we can't make overall decisions about the well-being of the land. But the rights initially created in Mabo would never be experienced by 21st century native title claimants today. This is because the rights to fish, to hunt, and to practice customary laws were fractured by later High Court decisions, legislation, and Western literature. Make no mistake about it, all native title has done for my people is dispossess us. So I continuously ask myself, where does dispossession live? And what the hell happened to the rights established originally in Mabo? Well, I can tell you, native title is just a mask for dispossession. And this dispossession has been achieved through what Professor Robert A. Williams Jr. suggests as the language of savagery. This racist, savage language has been used by the West to justify the displacement of my people. And this language of savagery is reflected highly in Western literature. And because of this, European systems were placed above our systems when considering the use of land. Quite often their literature has referred to us as the lowest class of human beings, subhuman, the weakest evolutionary link between man and monkey, an uncivilized race incapable of cultivating any form of property. And Australia still speaks this language every 26th of January, every single year when we celebrate Australia Day. The official day that terra nullius was declared on this land. In fact, the colony will go as far as implementing legislation that funds projects that amplify this discovery of Australia. And they did this. They did this with the Australian Bicentennial Authority Act in 1980. And thankfully it's been repealed. And because of this overuse of this language of savagery, it again provided a basis to dispossess us. And despite Mabo, and despite the overturning of terra nullius, this legal system still uses that same language of savagery every time a native title application is denied. After the Mabo decision, people were running around mad. What did this mean for them? But the Native Title Act was implemented in 1993. It provided a legislative framework that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had to prove in order to establish a successful native title application. One element of this act was that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had to prove continual connection to the land. Continual connection, which is often a difficult element to prove these days, considering we were subjected to over 200 years of displacement, stolen generations, the assimilation policy, the ecological violence inflicted upon our land and our non-human kin, and climate change. This is the language of savagery in legislative form. The fact that we have to prove that physical continual connection to something that was ours from the get-go. Dispossession also hides in the case law. When we look at a decision back in 1996, known as the Wick People in Queensland, 3 years after the Native Title Act was implemented. And this was a decision that dealt with competing interests, where you had a successful native title group and pastoral leaseholders who had the same interests in land. And the High Court had to decide this issue of what happens if there's a conflict between these two interests. Ultimately, the High Court ruled in favour of the pastoralists and it extinguished native title. But what it never answered is the question of extinguishment and whether that extinguishment meant it was suspended or it was permanent. So 2 years later, there was a decision though that did answer this question. It was the decision of Fijo and the Northern Territory. And what that case basically said was, when there's two competing interests, native title trumps, it's gone. And when it's gone, it's not suspended, it's gone forever. No more native title on that land. And then as a response to the Wick decision, you had greedy corporations running around wild thinking, what does this mean for me and my companies? So then we implemented the Native Title Amendment Act as a response to the Wick decision. And make no mistake about it, in the second reading speech, they used this language to produce bucket loads of extinguishment of native title. And it listed a range of commercial interests that would trump native title forever. This is the language of savagery in effect. They would rather extinguish our rights to the land than to suspend our rights to the land. And then we had the decision of Commonwealth and Ymir, which came later in 1999. And this considered our rights offshore, rights to the seabed, which is something that Mabo and previous decisions never considered at all. And Ymir said we could use the seabed for individual purposes, for cultural practices, but we couldn't cultivate or farm the land for natural resources in a commercial quantity. They deprived us of the economic opportunities embedded into those native title lands. This is the underlying savage language that feeds our dispossession under native title. And then, of course, we had the decision of Yorta Yorta in 2002. And there was one particular piece in this judgment that was so detrimental to later native title applicants. And it said this: the tide of history has indeed washed away any real acknowledgement of their traditional laws and any real observance of their traditional customs. The foundation of those ancestors have disappeared, and the native title rights and interests previously enjoyed are not capable of revival. What did this mean? It meant that one day, First Nations people will no longer be able to prove their continual connection to the land. And as a result, native title would disappear with it too. But limiting communal rights to the land is not something that colonists just practiced as soon as they showed up onto these shores in 1788. They've been using this savage of language in the peasant economy, in the English law, prior to landing here. And we know this with the decision of what's known today as Steele and Houghton, which is a landmark decision in English law. And it's considered the great case of gleaning, For you who aren't too familiar with what gleaning is, it's the practice of collecting leftover crops of grain on a private field. And this is the way the peasant economy created their income and fed their families. And the outcome of this decision ultimately said that the peasant economy a pest. And they ended up, the House of Lords ruled in favour of the private landowners. I worry one day that this land will become so privatised that communal access to the land is just a thing of the past. But communal access to land, it affects and it has affected everybody. In closing, I want to say this. All I want to do is take the best possible care of my country, of my Mother Earth. Native title doesn't allow me the right to do that. Native title never was for us as Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people. It was for the Crown to maintain control over our waters, over our lands, and over our resources. And after all these years, I finally figured out the answer to my question of where does dispossession live? And now I know. Dispossession and native title have the same address. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, I know it's been a long day, but our last speakers are definitely worth the wait. And I'm not just saying that because they get to work with the Troy Boyovich brothers, and anyone who knows me knows I love my Manly Sea Eagles, but because they're making a massive impact in the disability sector. I'm so proud to introduce you all to Steve Dressler and Laura Cheadle.
I grew up with a dream to play in the NRL. By the age of 12, I looked like this. I was the loudest, roughest, toughest kid in my family. I played alongside the likes of Sean Kepi from Manly, Reid Marnie from the Bulldogs, and Dylan Brown from the Eels. I was mad about footy until I looked like this. At 21, after 14 surgeries, 3 ACL reconstructions, my dream, as I knew it, was over. But this is where it took off.
Like Steve, I too have a body that hasn't always cooperated. Not that we're competitive, but 4 shoulder reconstructions, a major leg surgery, a back stress fracture, you name it, and I've probably broken it. I grew up in the small country town of Bowral with my sights set on cricket. I made my debut for the New South Wales Breakers at 16, and at 17, I made my debut for the Australian women's cricket team. Cricket was all I ever wanted to do. My dad played professionally for England, and my brother also played. So, through countless battles in the backyard to the green and gold, cricket was all I had my mind on. Unfortunately, through injury, my career has never gone to plan. I needed something to take my mind off cricket, and that's when I met Steve and found Whatability.
While I was at the Parramatta Eels in the National Youth Competition, the NRL had this amazing rule. You have to earn or learn to be able to play. So I got a job as a teacher's aide at a school for kids with autism. Along with 6 other players, some of the parents said, hey, can you work on a weekend? And I was like, absolutely. So I took the kids out on my jet ski, took them to the park, Luna Park, and was just having fun. And the parents were like, wow, young athletic males working with kids with disability. So then I thought, well, why don't I start a disability support service that uses athletes as support workers? And this is where Whatability was born. Whatability is a disability support service that specialises in community access and camps. We look after people living with a disability from as young as 4 all the way up to 65, and we take them out to do everything that you or I get to do. Luna Park, the beach, the footy, netball, Dreamworld, SeaWorld, and anything else you or I get to do. It was at this moment that I knew that putting happiness first for people living with a disability was going to make the world a better place.
We'd both noticed there aren't enough people with disabilities out in the community. Why? Why can't everyone be included? Inclusion, it's a big word and it can be scary. but we're here to make it simple. Someone very wise once said, diversity is being invited to the game, inclusion is being asked to play. We both come from sporting injuries, but we're united off the field when it comes to building a better world. And that world is inclusive, where everybody matters and everybody has the right to play. Diversity is about representation, and inclusion is about involvement. Those are two very different things, and it's important to help people understand that.
When people hear the word disability, it's often a visual representation. You might see someone in a wheelchair, or a blind person with a cane, or someone speaking sign language. But what you often don't see is an intellectual disability. So for me, it's rarely about what their disability is, it's about what they can do. It's always been so simple. Happiness comes first, no matter what your ability. After my first ACL reconstruction at 16, the doctors said I should retire and not continue. My coach said to me, it's their job to be conservative, our job to conquer the world. Ours is a far better project. And that's something I try not to let the barriers of the disability sector affect what we do. People living with a disability are always told what they can and can't do. Why can't someone living with a disability go on a jet ski? Why can't someone in a wheelchair go to the zoo? Why can't someone with Angelman's go to the football? Why athletes? 2 reasons. For me, athletes are the most influential people in the world. And if they can be hanging out with people living with a disability, it's going to change the perception of disability and as a support worker. And secondly, athletes are young, fit, energetic and fun, and just know how to be the best support workers.
Some of you may be wondering, what is a support worker? And before I met Steve, I didn't know either. Now, shameless plug, 10 out of 10 of our Sydney crew did say it was the best job in the world. In a nutshell, a disability support worker is someone who supports their participants' well-being in their daily lives. It's also someone that takes them out in the community and helps them achieve their goals. I support a lot of teenagers who are autistic. We go out on bookings where we might go to the park, to the beach, to the pool, even cooking lessons. No 2 days out are the same, but before I found Whatability, I didn't know what Angelman's or cerebral palsy was. And it's okay if you don't know. Disability has this ugly stigma around it, and it puts barriers on people with disabilities reaching their goals. It is this stigma that people with disabilities can't do the things that we do. That is what we're trying to break down. We're trying to be the loudest voice in this space, so as a society, we're not afraid to talk about it. You might not know this, but 1 in 6 Aussies has a disability. That's nearly 4.4 million people.
All right, who in here watches sports? Does anyone know who these guys up here? Tom Trbojevic? Yeah. Yep. Angus Bell or Matty Proud? Or Lauren Cheadle? Did you know that they're also support workers for Whatability? Part of breaking down the stigma means putting it in a positive light. If Tom Trbojevic, current Manly Seagulls, New South Wales Blues and Kangaroos player, can hang out with kids with disability, can you? If Matty Proud, current New South Wales Swifts and Aussie Diamond player can you? If Angus Bell, current Waratah and Wallaby can you? Lauren Cheadle, current Sydney Sixer and Aussie rep player can you? I want to see people living with a disability get the exact same opportunities as everyone in this room.
Together, we're leading the charge to build a world where everyone can play. That is how sport is going to change the world. And now it's your turn. Here are 3 things I'm hoping to plant in your memory, embracing all abilities. How much better our lives and community would be. 1, walk with an open mind and challenge the assumptions you may have. Next time you're sitting at a cafe or at a restaurant and you hear a kid screaming, don't automatically assume it's a spoiled kid throwing a tantrum. 2, listen more and talk carefully. It's okay to say the wrong thing. Just don't be a dick about it. A great example is when you first start in the sector, you might refer to someone without an intellectual disability as normal. You quickly learn the correct terminology is neurotypical. It's really that simple. 3, invite everyone to play. Fun can be seen in so many different ways, and there are so many better things in life than winning. I can tell you firsthand, you go 10-pin bowling with our Watability crew, an experience you will never forget. Our future is one that is inclusive, no matter what your ability. Sparking a change is as simple as asking yourself, how can I invite everyone to play? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're at the end of the day. Give yourself a big clap. Amazing. Huge thank you to our presenting partner, the University of Sydney. They've been supporting TEDx for the past decade, so huge thanks to them. And we have this awesome artwork that we've collectively made together. And I have the winners here of the Hoodie Prize. They are Dean Fowdus-Borrett, Bella Brockwell, Rithul Anad, Ava Roberts, and Ruri Foster. So if you are one of those people, go to the courtyard and see the Sydney University staff. And finally, a huge thank you to our partners who's made today possible. The City of Parramatta, Innovative Productions, Studio 3am, Palm, The Milk Bar, and Boing Boing Productions.
As a proud Western Sydney girl, born and raised, how good is it to have an event like TEDx out here in Parramatta, the heart of the West? Thank you all for coming and see you guys next year.